Elias Rowan had never expected betrayal to hit him on an ordinary Thursday evening. He had stayed late at the office trying to fix a mistake he didn't cause, when everything he thought he knew about his partner and friend collapsed in a single moment. By the time he walked out of the building and stepped into the cold night air, his entire life felt split into two halves, before the betrayal and after. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the streets slick and reflecting the orange glow of streetlights. Elias walked quickly to his car, shoulders tense, holding tightly to the folder in his hand, evidence he wished he didn't have to see. He tossed it into the passenger seat, started the engine, and pulled onto the road, trying to make sense of everything. But sense wouldn't come. Only shock, hurt, and a slow-rising anger that made his chest feel tight. He'd built his small company from nothing. Years of late nights, risk, and sacrifice. Damon Vexley had joined him when the company was barely breathing. Elias had taken him in, taught him everything, trusted him. Damon had a sharp mind and charm that clients liked, while Elias had the patience and discipline to keep things running. Together they had climbed every step side by side. Or so Elias believed. But that afternoon Elias discovered the contract. It was their biggest deal yet. A multi-year project they had chased for almost a decade. The deal was supposed to save them, especially after a tough year. Elias had opened the folder with trembling hands, expecting good news. Instead he found a signature that looked exactly like his, except he hadn't signed it. Damon had. Damon had forged his name, cut him out of the profits and taken everything. The betrayal hit him LMS like a physical blow. He replayed the confrontation in his head as he drove. Elias had stormed into Damon's office, slamming the contract onto the table. Damon looked up, surprised at first, then calm, too calm, as if he had been rehearsing the moment. "You forged my signature," Elias said. Not shouted, not whispered, just said. The words were heavy, cold. Damon leaned back, fingers steepled. "I finalized the deal," he answered smoothly. "It had to be done quickly." "You shut me out," Elias replied. "You stole our biggest project." Damon didn't deny it. He only smiled, a small, hard smile that Elias had never seen before. "I did what I had to," he said. "You were holding the company back. We needed someone willing to take bold steps. I took them." The room felt smaller after that. Elias stood there in disbelief, trying to understand how the man he trusted most could say those words so casually. Damon didn't apologize, didn't look guilty, didn't even look conflicted. He seemed proud of what he'd done. Elias walked out, heart pounding, mind spinning. That's how the story ended, or so he thought. But something strange happened the moment he entered the highway. He wasn't using navigation. He hadn't tapped anything. His phone was in his pocket. Yet the dashboard suddenly lit up with a soft blue glow. And a robotic voice he didn't recognize said calmly, "Turn around." Elias gripped the wheel tighter. "What?" he muttered, glancing at the GPS screen. It showed no map, no route, just a blank background and the words "turn around" in bright white letters. He shook his head. Great. Another thing breaking today. He kept driving. Then the voice returned, softer but clearer. "Trust me. Keep driving." A cold shiver slid down his spine. He stared at the screen, confused and unnerved. His car wasn't supposed to talk unless he gave it directions. He hadn't given it any. And trust me? What kind of GPS said that? His first instinct was to pull over and turn off the engine. But something, maybe shock, maybe curiosity, kept him moving forward. His emotions were already frayed. The betrayal had left him raw and unfocused. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe he was too tired. Yet the screen flickered again, as if answering his doubt. 5 minutes to arrival. Arrival where? Elias had no destination. He was just driving to clear his head. But now the road felt different, darker, longer. As though something was guiding him even when he didn't want to be guided. He kept one eye on the screen and the other on the road. The night stretched out ahead of him, empty except for the faint reflection of his headlights on wet asphalt. Trees lined both sides of the highway like tall shadows watching him pass. He didn't like the feeling of being watched, but he pushed it aside. He tried to focus on what mattered, the betrayal. Damon had taken their life's work and used it against him. Elias kept replaying the moment Damon said, "You were slowing us down." As if loyalty was dead weight. As if trust didn't matter. As if Elias was nothing more than an obstacle. The more Elias thought about it, the more anger replaced the shock. But underneath the anger there was something else, hurt. Deep, heavy hurt that made every breath tight. Damon had been like a brother. Elias had believed in him. And Damon had used that belief to take everything Elias had built. The dashboard flickered again. For minutes to arrival. Elias exhaled, forcing his hands to loosen on footsteps. Light, slow, deliberate. He turned sharply. A silhouette emerged from the shadows near the edge of the lot. Elias's heart stopped for a beat when he realized who it was. Damon Vexley. Standing there as if he'd been waiting. "Always knew you'd come here," Damon said, stepping forward with the same calm confidence he'd shown earlier. "You never let things go." Elias stared at him, shock mixing with anger. "You followed me?" Damon shrugged. "I knew you'd look for answers. I knew you'd chase me." Elias exhaled slowly. He didn't understand how Damon found him. He didn't understand why the GPS had led him here. But one thing became clear. The betrayal wasn't finished yet. And neither was the story. Elias did not expect Damon to show up at the abandoned rest stop. For a second he simply stared at him, trying to understand how everything had escalated so quickly. Damon looked too calm for someone who had just been caught stealing an entire company's future. He stood under the flickering light like he belonged there, hands in his pockets, face unreadable, as if this was another routine business meeting. Elias felt anger mixed with confusion, but he forced himself to stay still. He wanted answers and Damon seemed ready to give a version of them. The night air was cold, but Elias felt warm from the rush of adrenaline. His heart beat fast, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had happened. Before he could speak, Damon stepped closer. "I knew you'd follow the trail," he said. "You're predictable when you're upset." His voice was controlled, a little smug, like he believed he had already won. Elias didn't understand how Damon found him or why he was here. He only knew that everything inside him was boiling with emotions he couldn't name. He took a slow breath. "Why did you do it?" he asked. No anger in his tone, just exhaustion. He needed to hear the truth from Damon's own mouth, even if the truth would hurt more. Damon gave a small laugh, the kind that carried no joy. "Elias, you're a good person," he said. "But good people don't get ahead. Not in this business. Not in any business." Elias clenched his jaw. "So you took everything?" Damon shrugged lightly. "I took what I earned. You were slowing down deals. Clients wanted faster results. Investors wanted bold moves. You kept waiting for perfect moments. I acted." The words hit Elias harder than he expected. It wasn't just betrayal. It was Damon rewriting their entire history. As if Elias's patience had been weakness, not strategy. As if years of loyalty had been nothing more than a burden. Elias felt a mix of disbelief and sadness pressing on his chest. He had trusted Damon, believed in him, built a company with him. Now Damon stood in front of him without a trace of guilt. Elias didn't shout. He didn't step forward. He simply asked, "Why forge my signature?" Damon's eyes hardened slightly. "Because you would have said no. And I'm done waiting for your approval." Elias shook his head slowly, trying to understand this version of Damon, brave, selfish, and convinced he was justified. Damon wasn't apologizing. He wasn't even pretending. He thought what he did was right. Elias looked around the empty rest stop. The darkness around them felt strangely symbolic. Like this place represented everything broken between them. He took another breath, grounding himself. "So you think betrayal is leadership?" he asked quietly. Damon didn't flinch. "I think results matter more than loyalty. I made the company stronger." Elias stared at him, hearing the irony in the words. "You made yourself richer," he corrected softly. Damon didn't deny it. The wind pushed through the broken windows behind them, making a hollow sound. Elias thought about everything he had gone through, building the company, trusting Damon, believing that they were building something together. Now he realized Damon had stopped seeing him as a partner long before today. Maybe Damon had been planning this. Maybe this betrayal wasn't spontaneous. Maybe it was a slow shift. A hidden change Elias never noticed because he believed too much in their friendship. He suddenly felt tired. Not physically but emotionally. Tired of betrayal. Tired of lies. Tired of carrying everything alone. Damon watched him, waiting, but Elias didn't give him the reaction he expected. Instead, he walked past him and stood beside his car, leaning on the door. He didn't want to be near Damon. Not until he understood one more thing. "How did you find me?" Elias asked. Damon smiled again, but this time the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I tracked company devices," he said simply. "Your car is still linked to the old system. You never changed the settings." Elias froze for a moment. That explained the GPS. It wasn't mysterious. It wasn't supernatural. Damon had taken advantage of a small detail Elias never thought mattered. Damon's calm tone made it clear. He had been planning this. All of it. Elias's trust had become the perfect tool for Damon's betrayal. Elias looked down, breathing deeply. Damon added, "You always made things too easy." That sentence shifted something inside Elias. It was no longer about a stolen contract. It was about someone he cared about seeing his kindness as weakness. Damon didn't just betray him professionally. He betrayed him personally. The person Elias thought was a friend now stood before him like a stranger who had never cared at all. His anger rose, but it mixed with clarity. He understood now that Damon didn't expect him to fight back. Damon thought Elias was too gentle, too moral, too slow. Damon saw himself as unstoppable and Elias as the one obstacle he had finally removed. But Damon was wrong. Elias wasn't weak. He simply wasn't driven by greed. That didn't mean he would accept injustice. The rest stop grew quieter, and for a moment neither man spoke. Elias could hear his heartbeat. He felt something shift inside him, resolve. He didn't want revenge out of anger. He wanted justice because Damon had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Elias lifted his head and met Damon's eyes. "What now?" Damon asked lightly, as if this was just another argument between colleagues. Elias looked at him steadily. "Now," he said, "I decide how to move forward." Damon smirked. "You won't go to authorities. You don't have it in you." Elias held his gaze. "You think that because you don't understand me at all." Damon raised a brow, waiting for him to break, waiting for Elias to respond emotionally. But Elias stayed calm. Instead of answering, Elias looked deep into Damon's face, searching for something, regret, hesitation, anything. But Damon showed nothing. He had chosen his path and didn't look back. Elias realized that the partnership had ended long before the forged contract. He had been holding on to an illusion. The real Damon had been hiding behind charm and talent, slowly drifting away from the values Elias lived by. Elias turned away and walked to the edge of the cracked pavement, staring into the open field. He needed space to gather his thoughts. The night was cold, but the open air helped him breathe. The wind brushed against his face, sharp and steady. He imagined what would happen next. If he pursued justice, Damon would lose more than money. He would lose his reputation, maybe his career. If Elias stayed quiet, Damon would walk away with everything, thinking betrayal had no consequences. Elias wasn't seeking revenge just to hurt Damon. He wasn't that kind of person. But he also couldn't let betrayal stand without accountability. If he did, he wouldn't be able to live with himself. He needed to make things right, not through violence, not through anger, but through truth. Behind him, Damon sighed. "You're wasting time thinking," he said. "You won't do anything." Elias didn't respond. Not yet. He kept thinking about the years he spent building the company, the trust he invested in Damon, the kindness he gave so freely. He realized something important in that moment. Kindness and strength were not opposites. He could be kind and still fight for justice. He turned back toward Damon, and this time Damon's confidence faltered just slightly. Elias wasn't shouting. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't defeated. He looked calm, and something in that calmness made Damon shift uneasily. "You betrayed me," Elias said in a steady voice. "And you think that makes you stronger. But strength isn't what you think it is." Damon scoffed. "Save the moral speech." Elias continued anyway. "Strength is doing what's right even when it's hard. Strength is building something without stepping on others. Strength is loyalty. You didn't earn anything, you took it." Damon looked irritated. Elias didn't stop. "You think I won't fight back," he said. "But I will. Not out of anger. Out of principle. Damon's jaw tightened. You don't have proof, he said quickly. Elias looked directly at the folder still in the car. I have everything I need. For the first time, Damon looked unsure. Elias walked back to his car and opened the door, picking up the folder. He didn't raise it like a threat. He simply held onto it with quiet purpose. Damon stepped forward slightly, but Elias shook his head. Don't, he said. This conversation is over. Damon tried to regain control. You're making a mistake. Elias closed the car door. You made the mistake, he replied. I'm just correcting it. He got into the driver's seat. Damon stood still, eyes narrowed, trying to predict his next move. Elias didn't give him time. He started the engine, turned on the headlights, and began to pull away. Damon stepped back, realizing too late that Elias wasn't braking. He was rising. As Elias drove out of the rest stop, back onto the empty road, the GPS flickered for the last time. Recalculating route. Elias didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew this much. He was ready to fight, not with anger but with truth. And that truth would be enough. Elias drove away from the abandoned rest stop, but the weight of the moment stayed with him like a shadow sitting in the passenger seat. The night felt colder now, sharper, as if the air itself understood that something important had shifted inside him. He didn't look back to see if Damon was still standing there. He didn't need to. The chapter behind him had closed. What came next would be hard, but for the first time since discovering the betrayal, Elias felt something steady inside him, clarity. But as he drove down the silent road, the headlights cutting across the darkness, doubt tried to break through. Not doubt about Damon's betrayal. That part was painfully clear. Doubt about himself. Doubt about the decision he was about to make. What if he was wrong? What if fighting back only pulled him deeper into the conflict? What if seeking justice made him like Damon, consumed by the idea of winning? The GPS chimed again, even though the screen remained blank. Stay on this road. The familiar robotic voice startled him. He had almost forgotten about it. Now it sounded calmer, steadier, as if mirroring his own thoughts. Elias shook his head, trying not to let the oddness distract him. Whether Damon triggered it or it was a glitch didn't matter right now. What mattered was what he had to do next. He drove in silence, the road stretching forward like a long ribbon of choices. The more he thought, the more he realized the entire situation wasn't simply about business. It was about who he wanted to become after everything fell apart. Betrayal had a way of shaping people. Could turn them bitter. Could turn them cold. Or it could force them to become stronger, clearer, and more determined. The rest stop faded into darkness behind him. Ahead he saw the glow of a small town. Its streetlights steady and warm, unlike the flickering bulb at the abandoned building. He drove through the empty streets, passing quiet houses and a closed gas station, until he reached a viewpoint by the edge of a hill. It overlooked the valley below. Soft light scattered like stars fallen to earth. Elias pulled over and turned off the engine. The silence wrapped around him gently, like an invitation to breathe. He stepped out of the car and leaned against the hood, letting the cold air wake him fully. He stared at the lights below, thinking of all the people down there with their own stories. Some broken, some hopeful, some trying to rebuild. Everyone carried something. Everyone had been hurt at least once. But not everyone allowed that hurt to define them. Elias looked up at the sky. A few stars peeked out through thin clouds. For the first time in hours, he exhaled slowly without feeling pressure in his chest. Still, he couldn't ignore the central question. What should he do now? His mind returned to Damon's face. The confidence, the lack of regret, the belief that betrayal was just strategy. Damon wasn't sorry for what he did. He felt justified. And that meant he would hurt others too someday. Maybe employees. Maybe clients. Maybe another partner who trusted him. Elias didn't want revenge for revenge's sake. He didn't want to see Damon suffer just to feel a moment of satisfaction. That kind of revenge never lasted. But he did want the truth to come out. He wanted fairness. He wanted to protect the company he had poured his life into. He wanted to make sure Damon couldn't do this again. The decision felt heavy but necessary. He walked back to the car, opened the door, and pulled the folder out of the passenger seat. Inside were copies of the forged contract, emails Damon thought Elias would never see. and financial records showing exactly how Damon manipulated the deal. Elias had everything he needed. Now he had to decide how to use it. The GPS screen flickered one more time, displaying a single new line. Do what's right. Elias almost laughed, not because the situation was funny, but because the message felt like a reflection of what he already knew. He didn't need the GPS to tell him that. The answer had been inside him the whole time. But hearing it, even through a strange electronic glitch, felt like confirmation. He started the car again and drove back toward the main road. The town disappeared in the rearview mirror as he made his way through winding streets and onto the highway. Each mile he put behind him felt like another layer of uncertainty falling away. By the time the sun began to appear on the horizon, soft orange light stretching across the sky, Elias had reached the city. The roads, once empty, now had early morning traffic, people heading to work, to school, to the start of another day. Elias joined the flow, his mind sharper than it had been in hours. He drove straight to the office of an attorney he knew. Not a friend, but someone with a good reputation, someone who cared about ethics and fairness. He parked and sat for a moment, gathering his strength. Then he picked up the folder and walked inside. The attorney, Miss Sterling, listened carefully as Elias explained everything. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't judge. She simply listened, her eyes steady and focused. When he finished, she closed the folder gently. Elias, she said, this is serious. What your partner did is illegal. Forging a signature on a major contract carries heavy consequences. Elias nodded, his hands clasped tightly together. I know, he said quietly. Miss Sterling leaned forward. Are you ready for what comes next? Once we start this process, there's no turning back. Elias didn't answer immediately. He thought of Damon's smile, the way he dismissed the years they worked together, the way he treated betrayal like strategy. He thought of the company employees who trusted the leadership. He thought of the clients who deserved honesty. And he thought of himself, who he was before all this and who he wanted to be after. I'm ready, Elias said softly but firmly. Miss Sterling nodded. Then let's proceed. They spent hours reviewing documents, drafting statements, preparing the case. It was slow, detailed work, but Elias stayed focused. Every step brought him closer to justice, not revenge fueled by anger, but justice fueled by truth. When they finished for the day, Elias left the office feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. He walked down the street, watching people rush by, some laughing, some tired, some lost in thought. Life kept moving, and so would he. That evening he returned home. The house felt quiet and peaceful. He stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the warmth settle around him. He realized he hadn't truly rested in days. He made himself tea, sat on the couch, and allowed his mind to slow down. He replayed the entire night in his head. The GPS voice, the rest stop, Damon's cold explanations, the moment he realized anger wasn't the path he wanted. He still hurt. He still felt the betrayal deeply. But now there was something stronger than the hurt, purpose. Before going to bed, he checked his phone. Miss Sterling had already sent him updates. The legal process was moving. Truth was moving. Elias turned off the phone and looked out the window. The city lights shimmered softly. Each light felt like a reminder that darkness didn't last forever. Not if people chose to stand against it. He closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. For the first time since the betrayal, he felt something close to peace. Not full peace, he had a long road ahead. But it was enough. The next morning, news began to spread through the company. Employees whispered. Emails circulated. Damon's actions were being questioned. Some people were shocked. Some weren't surprised at all. Damon tried to defend himself, tried to twist the story. But the documents spoke louder than his words. And Elias stayed calm, steady, professional. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply stood by the truth. The investigation grew. More evidence surfaced. Damon's confidence cracked. Within days, he was removed from leadership. Legal consequences followed. His name, once respected, now carried the weight of his choices. Meanwhile, Elias stepped into a new role. Not just professionally but personally. He rebuilt trust with employees. He rebuilt the company culture. He rebuilt himself. But the most important moment came weeks later, when Elias stood alone in his office at sunset, looking out at the city. The sky glowed gold, soft and warm. He realized he had reached a turning point. Revenge would have left emptiness. Justice left him grounded. He whispered to himself, I chose the right road. Outside, a car passed by, and for a moment, he imagined hearing the GPS voice again. Route complete. Elias smiled softly. He didn't need the voice anymore. He had found his way.